We have breaking news tonight. We're live at the airport here in Cheektowaga. As Jeff mentioned, an emergency landing made here in Buffalo just before the noon hour today. Good evening once again. I'm Keith Radford. You can see, actually, the plane in question just behind me, United Express. That's an Embraer 175. The plane is made in Brazil. They're fairly new. Many airlines here in the U.S. are flying them now. This plane going from Chicago's O'Hare Airport this morning, heading for Bradley Airport in Hartford, Connecticut. Not too far along on the trip, the pilots in the cockpit reported that they may have a problem with the pressurization system. One passenger on board, and there were about 75, 76 people on board. One man passed out, became unconscious. The pilots came down as quickly as they could. Once you get down below 10,000 feet, you have no problem breathing. Again, only one person affected as far as we know right now. You can see that the fire department officials are still there, ambulances, apparently a hazmat team going through and checking the plane just in case. My colleague Ed Drench, our reporter on the scene before me today, been here following this story since the very beginning.
And Keith, I've learned that those hazmat crews are here on the scene right now, going through the plane just as a precaution, testing the air quality after this United Express plane operated by SkyWest landed about 11:40 this morning. SkyWest insists this plane made an emergency landing solely because one of those passengers had a medical emergency, and they say that there was no problem with the pressure on board the plane. But the FAA, in a statement earlier today, says the crew on this SkyWest flight reported a pressure problem and declared an emergency, forcing them to land. SkyWest says there was no pressure problem once again and no problem with any of the equipment on board. One passenger we spoke with, Vanessa Bergman, says the oxygen masks never dropped, but they could certainly tell something was wrong and that there was a feeling of panic on board.
Then things started to get a little more panicky, and it seemed like that there was some emergency that was happening that wasn't just because we're medical, and they said there was a loss of cabin pressure. So at that point they asked us to tighten our seatbelts, and we basically nosedived until we leveled out at 10,000 feet, and that was pretty darn scary.
Bergman was the only passenger on board who came off this flight. She says she will now be driving to Connecticut or to Massachusetts, where she's from. You can see now crews seem to have wrapped up their efforts. Those hazmat crews were here going through this United Express plane once again, flight 5622 from Chicago O'Hare to Hartford, Connecticut earlier today. The hazmat crews have wrapped up. They were going through as a precaution only at this point. There were many other passengers on board, dozens other passengers on board this plane who have been waiting for much of the afternoon to get back to Connecticut. We're told the flight that they are on, that replacement plane, should be taking off within the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, no other injuries except for that one other person, Keith, who was passed out for some unknown reason. All right, good. Thanks very much, Ed. Just to give you a little background on SkyWest Airlines, it's a regional carrier based out of the airport in St. George, Utah, down in southern Utah. They fly for all of the airlines. This particular plane happens to be under contract to United. That's why it has the United logo and the United paint job. Very similar to the Continental Airlines plane that crashed in Clarence Center. It wasn't actually owned by Continental. It was owned by Colgan Airlines, which was owned by Pinnacle. A lot of confusing things in the airline industry these days, but this airline's been around for about 30, 35 years. Never had a major problem as far as I know off the top of my head. So we're following the story. We'll bring you the latest should something else develop this evening. Live at the airport in Cheektowaga, Ed Drench, Keith Radford, 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you, Jeff.